Well, welcome, folks. Welcome to Just Folks Conversations with Emma. I'm Emma, and I am so excited. You have no idea. I have been waiting for months. I literally mean that, months, to speak to my next guest. You are going to be so glad that I waited as long as I did because we have a great conversation coming up. Now, in the world, there are people who are gifted and talented. There are billions of people on the planet. So there's lots of folks with gifts and talents, but not everybody shares their gift or their talent, especially the way this gentleman has. He has really made his mark on the music industry and in the lives of so many people. So without me gibbering and jabbering on a bit more, I want to introduce you to and welcome my next guest, Mr. George Gray. I'm glad you could come and spend some time and
Sure.
share your life experiences. I want to actually begin pretty much at the beginning because you are a native of Baltimore. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And you are a musician. Your specialty is in drumming.
Drumming.
Yes. Among other things that you do very well, but that's the primary focus. And
Right.
you started off as a very young child demonstrating some talent for the drums. What was that like? Tell us about
Uh,
your childhood.
well, it was interesting. I started out at St. Peter's Claver School as a real young kid. So the interesting thing was they used to have their music period for the kids, and they have a little brown box. And they have all these little instruments like shakers and shakerettes and little bongos and little sticks and little doodads and things like that. So I always would gravitate to the bongos. So the teacher gave me the bongos one day, and I just started playing. And they looked at me like, "Where you learn that? Wow!" Well, back in the day, we had Lucille Ball, as y'all know. They used to come on, and I used to watch Desi and watch what he was doing with the bongos and the congas and everything, and that just completely just like flabbergasted. My father actually went out and bought me a real set of bongos that were bigger than me. So I used to play around on them, and there was a little section of the TV show where Desi used to take the bongos between his legs and he could flip them. I figured it out. So I did that in the class. And the teacher said, "You don't belong in my class. You need to be in another class. You're only like maybe 6 or 7." And wow. So they moved me to another class. And that was fine. But what really got me was Baltimore during those days used to have parades up and down west side of Baltimore and everything. And over in the west side of Baltimore, there was American Legion's Post and a couple other groups like that. So they would have the parades. I was always like excited and gravitated to the parades and even walking the length of the parade with the groups. And so I became interested in drumming that way. So there was a drum corps in my area called the Falcon Drum and Bugle Corps. And they were they were the drum and bugle corps that pretty much dressed like the Mexican caballeros with the big brim hat and the big sleeves and the bell-bottom pants, which were like really incredible. So I was like, wow, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. So my mother took me to the headquarters, which was located on Lawrence between Division and Pennsylvania Avenue. He took me upstairs and they said, my son wants to play drums with you guys. Can he become one of your potential drummers? And they said, not really, because he's too small. The drums is too big for him. So we'll take him in, but he would have to start somewhere else, and maybe as he grows. And I was not excited about that at all. But to get me going, they put me on the color guard with the flags and everything. So they gave me the saber, which is a sword. So I marched down the street with the color guard for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. At this point, I'm getting real bored. I'm like, so when am I get to graduate to playing the actual drum? They said, you got to be a little bit taller. So finally, I guess a year and a half, they finally was moving me to the drum section.
How old were you at that point?
Oh, gracious. I had to be in like around 10 or 11.
Okay.
And so they moved me there. And the drum instructor was one of the members of the Baltimore Yankee Rebel, which was a well-known competitive drum corps. Okay. So he taught us rudiments. And so we...
Mm-hmm. I want us to all be able to picture this. Was this an integrated group, or was it strictly in the Black community?
This is a Black community. Okay. Right. This is a Black community. And this guy, he was a white guy that came and he was so professional and he knew his thing so well. He was teaching us all the rudiments. Once we learned the rudiments, the hard part was, since none of us read any music, he was teaching us the songs note by note, tap by tap, beat by beat. So we finally got it all down. So we was at the point now to be able to actually march in a parade. And I was excited. I had this big snare drum with a sling across me. And I still wasn't tall enough to not have that pain on my leg. I'm carrying that snare for about, let's say, 2 or 3 miles or more. But then I grew out of it and everything. So at that point, I had no clue. I wasn't not yet interested in playing the drum set. It was strictly military. So Falcon Drum and Bugle Corps became a competitive corps. In other words, they were competing like at the Memorial Stadium or different stadiums, like in Philadelphia or whatever, with other competitive drum and bugle corps. So it was all legit. It was all like doing maneuvers and making angles and all that kind of stuff and making letters with such a big group. So that took me into now going to Douglas High School. So I became a part of the Douglas High School marching band on the drum section.
And I'd like to point out that Douglas High School is known worldwide because I can't think of his name. The Supreme Court Justice who graduated from there. I'm having a blank. I can't believe that. Go ahead. I'm interrupting the flow. Sorry.
So I went to Douglas.
Thurgood Marshall. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I went to Douglas, and Thomas Delane, he was the musical director there. So we had marching band. Now I'm being introduced to the jazz band. Do I want to be a part of jazz? It wasn't really striking me anything exciting at first, but it seemed like it was fun. So I became a part of the jazz band. I had to learn how to read music. So my mother and my parents did have me enrolled at the prep course at Peabody. So learning how to read, and I was playing drum set then, but it was just something to do. I wasn't excited or motivated by it at all. That wasn't my interest. Because my other interests too, that I need to include, I was also into the martial arts. So at the age of 6, my father enrolled me into a martial arts class at Shop Street Church. Because going to Douglas, when I was in junior high school, I went to Old Douglas, Houston Woods Junior Senior High School, which was on Calhoun and Baker Street. So in order to go to school, you had to know how to fight. I hate to say that because folks were approaching you, give me your jacket, give me this, and who are you, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So my father enrolled me into that. So I was a little bit more into the martial arts study than I was in actually the drumming. And that lasted for a while with that. So Douglas, marching band, drum corps, and jazz band. So now I come out of Douglas, and well, a little bit before I came out of Douglas, Morgan State University used to recruit the students from the Douglas band in order to fill in the ranks for Morgan State. So I had already started marching with Morgan State my senior year at Douglas. And now it's beginning to get like, wow, it's beginning to become fun now because Morgan, they're dancing and they're doing spins and they're turning, and I mean, it turned into like a serious show. So I was loving that. So when I went to Douglas, I went to Morgan before I graduated from Douglas, the drum line had already accepted me. They had already told me right off the bat, well, when you come here, you're going to pledge. You're going to pledge the drum fraternity. And I said, what is that? I had no clue what they were talking about. So now I'm marching with Morgan State. The following year, I attend Morgan State. So I'm already used to what the situation is based on their concept. Immediately, the upperclassman that was the drum instructor, that was the section leader, graduated. And who do you think became section leader? Right off the bat, my freshman year.
That's very impressive. Very impressive.
So they loved my way I played the rudiments and everything, and it was interesting because then also I became a part of by being a music major, I had to be a part of the jazz ensemble, the orchestra, the concert band, and Dr. Nathan Carter also recruited me to become his drummer for the choir. So everything begins. I'm still not really interested in drum set yet. Not really. I'm doing it because I should, because it's a part of my major. So some of the guys at Morgan put together a little band outside of that. So we were a funk band. So we were doing a funk band. It was called Charlie Company. So we did Charlie Company. So we played all the covers at the time, you know, like the Commodores and who the other people like Cameo and all that. And Brothers Johnson, we were learning all that kind of music and playing around. So Charlie Company turned into Pockets. So what happened was, now I don't want to leave out Intervisions. After Charlie Company, it was a group called Intervisions that was a little bit more on the jazz tip that we kind of put together. It was Al McKinney, Gary Granger, David Smith, Jimmy Wilson, and myself on drums. So we were a little bit more on the jazz crusader trip. So we were playing places like the Sportsman's Lounge, Bryce's Hilltop Inn, The Closet, different little clubs around town. So now I'm beginning to get a little bit more interested in playing and learn how to play and how to better my drumming. One night at the Sportsman's Lounge, I don't know if you're familiar with Chester Thompson. Chester Thompson went to Morgan. No, Chester Thompson went to Douglas. And Chester Thompson immediately got picked up by Frank Zappa to play drums. From Frank Zappa, he went to George Duke, played with George Duke. From George Duke, he was also a member of Weather Report. So Chester came to the Sportsman's one night and asked if he could sit in. He sat in on those drums. It gave me a brand new attitude. When I saw that guy play, I just said that it was either I was going to continue playing drums or I was going to stop playing drums, because he played so much drums and it was so connected and it was so much in the groove that I was never seen anyone play drums like that. So I went home scratching my head. How can I used to play like that? So I studied and studied and studied. So this is Intervisions. So eventually Intervisions became, they were the ones that became Pockets. Certain guys in Intervisions did not want to do R&B. They wanted to strictly stay with playing jazz. So that's the horn section. The horn section left. So it left three guys, Gary Granger, bass player, Al McKinney, piano player, and myself, trio. We needed horns. So we went back to Charlie Company. and got the horn section from Charlie Company and made them a part of Pockets. Verdine White of Earth, Wind, Fire selected a vocalist that wasn't even from this side of the country. Laurie Jacobs is from Oakland, California. She brought all of us together. So that created Pockets. And our first album at that time was Come Go With Me. The second album was Take It On Up. The third album was So Delicious. So at that point, martial arts went out the window. And now I'm like focused and trying to better my drumming and to be on top of it, because Pockets led to some other performances for me. I also started playing drums with Deniece Williams. I did some work with The Emotions, Stephanie Mills, Jesse Johnson Review. Jesse Johnson was one of the guitar players that used to accompany Prince. So that started a whole nother realm of, let's say now, this is my livelihood now.
Well, this is really interesting to me because you're kind of literally falling into a career is something that, you know, particularly at the level of expertise and fame and experience that you have now, people work really hard to try to make those pieces fit. And to me, it seems like the linchpin for you was meeting Verdine White. Now, how did that come about? Because without him, things might have gone a different way.
Well, while we was at Morgan, the group, during the time, groups and singers, we used to send out videotapes and recordings just to try to get a record deal. The idea at that time to get a deal. And so we sent videos and recordings and cassette tapes and all that to Verdine. I can't remember exactly who really connected. It might have been Al McKay. Al McKay was the leader of Pockets and whatnot. So I think he made that connection. And Verdine really dug the sound of Pockets. So Verdine and Maurice actually flew here to Baltimore to hear us perform at a club called the Scorpio Lounge, which is over there near Sinclair Lane. So they came and heard us. And believe it or not, we went into the recording studio here in Baltimore. There used to be a barge down to the harbor before the harbor became the harbor. And the barge was out on the water, and it was a recording studio. So we went to the recording studio and recorded some tracks. And by the time we could finish recording the tracks, I think about a week or two later, we had a severe thunderstorm. The barge went down with the recordings and the tapes and everything. That was it. So Verdine said, bump all this. We're flying you guys to LA. We're going to fly you to LA, and you're going to record at Walliator's studio, Sunset Sound. And this is like big time recording studio. So as we're recording in Studio B, Atlantic Star was recording in Studio A. So we get this opportunity to meet them and whatnot. So that's how it started with Verdine and Maurice. So we recorded the first album, Come Go With Me. And Verdine suggested right off the bat, we got to get you guys out there. We got to get you out there. So we'll tell you what you're going to do. Earth, Wind & Fire is doing an all-in-all tour, 1978 to 79. We want you guys to open up for us. So it was Pockets, Deniece Williams, and Earth, Wind & Fire. We must have did every city and state in the United States, starting from the East Coast, working our way to Vancouver. That was the first tour.
How long was that tour?
A year.
A year. So you got a lot of experience by being the opening act for such a phenomenal group, because they were really quite big.
Yeah, they were like at the high level in the 70s and whatnot. So of course we was like we were overwhelmed and like, what? And I mean, they really hooked us up. We went to their wardrobe people, Bill Witten. Our costumes was similar to Earth, Wind & Fire's costumes. We went to their vocal coach in order to get our vocals together and everything. So they considered Pockets to be Earth, Wind and Fire's proteges, pretty much. Yeah. It was one of the best experiences I ever had. That tour was like, even to this day, one of the most professional put together tour I have ever been on, because everything was clockwork. They had a telephone book where everywhere you're going, doctors, whoever you need to get in contact with, the vendors, the hotels, everything was right there. You didn't have to ask anybody anything, because you had like this big book. And they had the vendors on tour with them. They had a specialized stage where they had the theatrical act. So we would go on and perform first, and then these would come on and do her thing, and then Earth, Wind and Fire come out and do their opening Elements of the Universe, Earth, Wind and Fire, about 2 hours. It was amazing.
So that was really like having graduate level coursework in terms of a career development.
Right, yeah, right then and there. I mean, it's like boom, boom, boom. Leonard Smith was Earth, Wind and Fire's business manager, so he kind of took us under his wing and hipping us with all the pros and cons with the business, and making sure that you have an entertainment lawyer for this, and making sure that you're aware of that, and the agent for that, and this and that, and the other. And at that time, we could afford it. So he's just educating us on what to be prepared for and whatnot. So it was an incredible learning experience. But it's interesting, because we started out up here, and I don't want to say that my career had fallen, but became able to really learn how to pay the dues, because we started out on that level. And then
what do you mean by paying the dues? What did that look like?
Paying dues, it means that, okay, being in Pockets, we actually moved to West Coast. We're living in Beverly Hills, and we have cars, and we're doing this, so we're seeing the limelight right off the bat. So after maybe 5 or 6 years, the group kind of had to move back home based on business, and had to try to regroup, because we weren't with CBS Colombo Productions anymore. So now this is become where you want to have to do your work. You have to pay your dues. Fortunately, Gary Granger, bass player, and myself, we continue gigging. Other members of the group, depending on how fast you can get gigs to get work, to make money, they had to gravitate to going and get 95s and things like that. One of the members of the band, unfortunately, when we were trying to piece everything together, Irvin Madison had gotten married. He's a saxophone player. And about maybe a year after that, he was murdered in his apartment. Some guy who lived in the same apartment complex came downstairs saying that he owed him money, and this guy was intoxicated. He busted his way into the home, and they got to scuffling, and he stabbed Irvin about 7 times. Irvin's wife tried to pull the guy off. He turns around and stabs her, but she survived. So that even made things a little bit, intense and crazy. So I continued to work. I started working with Peaches and Herb. I did some stuff with Stephanie Mills, Emotions. Deniece Williams was such a sweetheart. When I was working with Deniece didn't have any work, she would refer me to her agent. And she said, well, while we're off, my agent will find you work. So her agent connected me with a group called T Connection. T Connection was based out of.
Okay, so you didn't have your own personal agent at this point.
No.
You guys were still trying to reconstruct your group, because you have
Right.
a member, and you're no longer with Earth, Wind and Fire.
Right.
So you have this wealth of experiences, but you still don't have your structural organization together. Like
Right.
Fine. Okay.
Right. So at that point, Pockets was on a hold.
Okay.
now. So now it's time to figure out how you're going to make a living and eat and do that sort of thing. And Deniece, when I worked with Deniece, fortunately Deniece turned me on to her agent, Don Taylor, he was also the manager of Bob Marley. So he was managing T-Connection at the time, R&B funk group from out of Freeport, Bahamas. So they flew me into the Freeport, Bahamas, and we must have rehearsed for like maybe 5 or 6 months, and before we actually came back to the States to do the tour. So we came back to the States and we did the tours. So I was working pretty much. I was doing the R&B situation with major acts. Mary Wilson from out of the Supreme, she was down doing off-Broadway. So I did some off-Broadway dates with her. Now it began to get interesting because Gary Bartz, alto saxophone player from Baltimore, well known, he came into my world and said, George, you need to learn how to play some jazz. That's the element that's missing. Because if you learn how to play jazz, it would open up other doors as far as the way that you would think and play. And I wasn't feeling jazz, because my thing at that time too was jazz wasn't really making any money. I want to stay in the R&B sector and make money. But Gary would invite me down to the closet. He would have a jam session every Friday and Saturday. And all the big names who would go to Blues Alley on the way in, they would stop at the closet in Baltimore.
Okay.
And they would play.
And Blues Alley was located where? Which city?
Blues Alley is in D.C., Georgetown.
Okay.
So they would come back, like folks like Freddie Hubbard and Yoto and Flora Perrin, Leon Thomas. They would circle back around, and they would come to the closet. Freddie Hubbard would play so much more better and intense than he did at Blues Alley, because he's in his element and stuff. So Gary Boss, he had Baltimore rhythm section, and sometimes I would play, and this is how I met those guys. And so now I'm trying to learn how to play jazz. The older jazz musicians said to me, verbatim, man, you're a funk player. You got that heavy left hand. You'll never learn how to play jazz because you just so R&B-ish. That made me work even harder to learn how to swing. So I've learned how to swing, hanging out with Gary Boss and doing gigs around Baltimore with jazz cats.
You were talking about the comment that you didn't know that you wouldn't really be able to play jazz,
right?
Jazz style. Can you distinguish for the audience the primary difference between the R&B style of drumming and jazz? What makes it different?
Well, swing is different from funk. Now, to try to break it down so it can make sense from a drummer's point of view, you're playing on the beat. You're playing a basic funk groove. Jazz, you're not really playing on the beat. You're playing a little bit more anticipated. And your hi-hat is basically the mechanism that makes things swing, along with riding the cymbal. So it's a whole nother approach, a whole nother concept of what you're doing on the cymbal and the hi-hat, which is the cymbals that are two that come together, opposed to just playing R&B. So there are drummers that can't switch gears. There are drummers who try to play jazz that are funk drummers, and when they play jazz, they actually sound like they're playing funk still. And the vice versa. There are jazz drummers, but they switch and try to play R&B or funk, they sound like they're playing jazz. So it's hard. There are drummers out there that can switch gears. I can switch gears. There's a lot of drummers, but it takes this understanding. It's just two different concepts. It's just like going from playing jazz to funk, now learning how to play Latin, how to play Cuban drumming. They all have their own language. They have their own interpretation of where their clave is Clave means the foundation of where it lays. So I finally learned how to swing. And from there, and Gary Bartz mentioned to me, he said, you know, you should move to New York because you didn't completely just gravitate and get the most that you can get out of Baltimore. Baltimore is a learning ground. It's a training ground. But if you want to make it in music, and I even say this to young musicians today, you have to step out. You have to go, if you really want to do this, you have to go to where it really is. So New York was the mecca of music. So Gary said to me verbatim, he said, the sooner you move and take your place in line, the sooner you get called. And then a well-known drummer here, Deniece Chambers, who is doing very, very, very well, he said the same thing to me. He said the same thing that Gary said. He said, George, you need to move. I mean, you're getting all the gigs in Baltimore, but if you really want to make a name for yourself, you're going to have to go where you can create a name for yourself. So that encouraged me to move to New York.
Now, let me ask you this. Once you got to New York and you're surrounded by all of that competition and all of those different styles of drumming, how did you make your way? What allowed you to distinguish yourself?
Well, you know, the amazing thing, too, back to Gary Bartz, because I said something to him before I moved. I said to Gary, I said, but Gary, I moved to New York. It's like already a ton of drummers there. I mean, it's like, I'd just be what, just another statistic or just another drummer just trying to get a gig. He clarified everything. He said to me, George, everyone has a story to tell on their instrument. Each person is not going to tell the same story. You have something different to say than the next drummer. There's going to be musicians that's going to want you to play with them, that's going to like you, and there's going to be musicians that's not going to like you. So everybody has a different story, even saxophone, piano. You might say there's like 15 piano players over there. Where would I fit in? They all have something different to say on the instrument. So that's how that, did that.
So were you able then to figure out what it was you wanted to say, what kind of story you were telling, what mark you wanted to make?
Well, when they called me to play R&B, I played R&B that I knew how to play and how to play along with the bass player. The same thing with the straight ahead, just being able to do you for what you have learned and all the records you listen to, all the drummers that you have listened to and taken ideas from, and you incorporate them into who you are. And so you're different. You're automatically different from the next guy. So folks are hiring you because of what flair or what energy level or your approach and your attitude and what you apply to the music. Yeah.
So once you moved to New York, what was the first major booking that you got? What happened?
Well, before moving to New York, I met an incredible pianist, musical director, arranger by the name of Onaje Allen Gomes. And Onaje is the guy who did the arrangement of Bet You By Golly Why for Simon. And so he had records out, and he was also musical director for Jeffrey Osborne, Deniece Williams. It goes on. So I met him at Painters Mill Music Center. Now, he was a musical director there with Deniece Williams and Jeffrey Osborne.
Okay.
And so I had...
Painters Mill no longer is functional, but as far as I know, but it was in Owens Mill, but maybe it's still open, but back in the day, it was a pretty heavy venue.
Yeah. Right. So I met Onaje there, and him and I hit it off right off the bat because 3 years before he became musical director of Deniece Williams, I had previously worked with Deniece. So we hit it off real well, and he was familiar with pockets, so he was impressed with that and everything. So we left saying, we got to get together. So he hadn't really heard me play jazz. He knows me from pockets, R&B, funk. So he asked me, could I play jazz? And I said, yeah, I can play jazz. So he called me to do a gig in New York, and we played jazz, and we also played contemporary, which is kind of R&B. So he was looking for a drummer that can do both. So that started the ball rolling with him. So when I first moved to New York, I'm telling you, the first week, Onaje had me working with him at a club called Fat Tuesdays. Fat Tuesday, the gig went from Tuesday to Sunday, and he was featuring Will Downing on vocals. At that time, Will Downing was signed with Island Records. So Onaje was one of the producers. So that was my first week in New York. And my first week. So from that point on, I became a regular drummer with Onaje. And Onaje had me doing record dates. I did a record date on Stanley Jordan's record. I did like maybe 3 or 4 of Onaje's records. And he had me all over the place. We worked. And he also introduced me to other entertainers that basically was calling me for work as well. So even though that sounds easy, after doing Fat Tuesdays, because you have to also understand between these gigs are not week after week after week after week. So when you do a string of gigs for 1 week, you got to figure out how you're going to make money in the following week. So I have to include this because I want the younger musicians to also understand that you just can't move to New York and just say, discover me. It don't work like that, really. You have to prepare yourself. You have to have other skills so that you can make money to pay rent and eat. So before moving to New York, I took a course of being an administrative assistant through the Baltimore Urban League. So what they do, they take your typing skill of 0 and make sure that you're able to type 65 words a minute, do dictation, know how to create different forms of letters, the whole kit and caboodle. So I did that for a while with an agency. The agency faxed my records to New York. And after Fat Tuesdays, I was working at World Trade 7 doing secretarial kind of things until I became able to just switch the gears and be doing music completely. But you have to have a plan. You can't just go there like, I'm a great drummer, discover me. No. First of all, you have to hang out in the clubs and the bars in order to get to know the different guys that could possibly turn you on to work. And that takes money. You have to pay to get in. You have to buy a drink or two. And you're doing this every night. When I was working doing the typing and things, every night after that, I was hanging out in the clubs. I was at the Blue Note. The Blue Note had a jam session that didn't start until 1 a.m. So I'm hanging out 1 a.m. to about maybe 3. Then I have to be up at 7 to go to work, to be at work by 8. But this is what you have to do. This is part of paying dues.
Got you. So who made you aware of this detail preparation? Would you contribute that to your time with Earth, Wind, and Fire and how organized they were? Or did someone pull you aside and say, George, do X, Y, and Z?
I was watching people. And there's a couple musician friends of mine that moved to New York before I did. And they just moved there, able to play. They had no skills. They couldn't pay rent. They sit up in a hotel, sitting up in somebody's apartment that they're sharing with. But if you're not working some kind of way, you can't help that person pay rent. So they moved back to Baltimore with a sad story, saying, well, man, you don't want to move to New York because people don't help you and people don't call you for gigs. And they didn't really tell the other side of it. The folks didn't call you for any gig because they didn't know you was there. You're not able to go to the clubs to pay to get in. You don't have no money. So you stand in your apartment trying to call people to let them know you're here. But the other side of the picture, they need to see you play. They heard about you, they know you're good, but Can you play? Are you what I want? Are you going to deliver what I need in my band? So when I saw that, that's what I said to myself, I'm not going to do that. I need to have a plan because I need to eat. And I need to be, and I don't want to come back home with a sad story that so-and-so didn't call me because really he wasn't able to give enough time to be there and didn't think about getting skills.
So what it sounds like is that you were setting up your own free auditions constantly, everywhere you had a chance by being in the clubs and being around these people and waiting for that opportunity, that question. I guess, I don't know if you asked if you could sit in or you were invited, but whenever the opportunity presented itself, you were there and you were ready to do that.
Right. And see, they would have these jam sessions. Like, different musicians would say, George, go to Visiones. They have jam session over there. Jam sessions is run by Eddie Henderson, trumpet player. Go to this spot, go to the Angry Squad, go to Zinc Bar, they got jam session. And that's where all the musicians gravitate to. They're hanging out, folks who have big names, they're hanging out there, they just came off tour, or they're just visiting New York, so that's where they go, they want to hear some music. So that's where you had to go. Now, I remember someone told me to go to Visiones. Visiones was around the corner from the Blue Note, and they said Eddie Henderson was running the gig. So I went there, you sign a list, and they call you according, trumpet player, drummer, and they switched the whole stage around. And Eddie never called me. My name was on the list. He didn't call me up. So I was like this outdone. But why you didn't call me up? My name was on the list. So he said to me, just keep coming back. Eventually you get called. And that's how he looked at it. I was a little bit like, didn't like that. So I kept coming back. So he still didn't call me up. Well, Sylvia, Eddie Henderson had called Sylvia up to sit in. So she went up to sit in, and she was playing. And she saw me sitting in the audience. We had met previously. So she figured me to come up on the stage. So I make my way up on the stage. And while she's playing, I'm playing the cymbal. While she gets up and leave and let me take over the whole drum set. So when I take over the whole drum set, now Eddie looks back at me and says to me, well, why didn't you come up here in the first place? I looked at him. So at that point, I guess I'm okay now. He accepted me. But you have to go around to different, even now, musicians have to go around to different venues and sit in. Even vocalists, the singers, is the same thing. They have to go and sit in and sing a song just to see if they are up to par to be called for whatever, or to be discovered by somebody who might be a producer sitting in the audience.
Well, there's a little bit of, I say, mind psychology tricks going on where you have to kind of position yourself. And it's a real dance, it looks like. So you got to be pretty brave, I think, to jump into the deep end of that pool.
Well, I was a little bit, the first couple of times I went, I was a little bit upset because I actually signed the list, and I know that it's extra that you have to deal with, like a mind game sometimes. Okay. And that was coming from a lot of times, like the older musicians. They just want to test you. That's a whole other story. Well, they constantly was. Say it again.
Sounds like you're pledging a fraternity in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you before they let you in or accept you, they want to test you out a little bit and put you through some paces.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because, see, here it is. I guess I can say this. A lot of older musicians, they went through a lot. They were playing the music during the time that they couldn't go in the front door, and they were dealing with the racial situation. So when us younger folk came into the picture, we didn't have to go through that. So they feel that we owe them something, which is a mind thing. So they want to test you and just wanted us just like dual control kind of factor. Because I work with several artists who just like, they just literally control freaks. And it had nothing to do with the music. It had nothing to do with your playing, but just this is what they wanted to just take you through this because they felt that they paid more dues than we have, and now we're coming in at the tail end of when everything is much easier. You know. So that's
a very interesting mindset. But you feel that's primarily among the older musicians, and not with your generation of players now.
No, and I'm not saying all the older musicians, because you have nice musicians. You have older musicians who just like, they gravitate to you because of your personality, and they get along with you. They like what you play into the bandstand. And I'm gonna say someone in particular that would take the musicians to stuff. Miles Davis. There's a musician that both of us know. I'm not going to say his name, but he was on the bandstand with Miles. So they decided in the dressing room what song they're going to do. So Miles said to the musicians, he said, "We're going to do so and so on B flat." I said, "Okay." So we're on the bandstand. Tells everybody else except this one musician, "You know what? We're going to do it in E." Didn't tell him. So they get ready to play. They play the chord, and this guy is wrong. And so the guy says to Miles Davis, he says, "Hey, why didn't you tell me that you're going to change keys? Couldn't you hear what we're doing?"
Was that a legitimate statement? I mean, if he was supposed to all come in at the same time, how would you know that everyone is in a different key?
Precisely.
So that was intentional.
That was intentional. Yeah, I mean, if you hear that everybody else is going somewhere else, figure it out, basically.
Well, that's a different kind of training too, I suppose.
Right. A training that you don't need.
Agreed. But you've been in a lot of places in the world. You've done a lot of traveling. You've worked with musicians. There's a gentleman that, to me, and I did watch a number of those videos that you did with him, who's a South African musician. Would you like to talk about him?
No, Abdullah Ibrahim.
Yes.
Yeah, Abdullah taught me a lot. It taught me how to play the drums differently. Because when I first started working with him, I came in like ready to just do what I normally do. And he said to me right off the bat, "We don't play like that around here. We play very soft. So you need to know how to play with dynamics, power, and intensity at a low volume." And he played very soft. I mean, it was so soft that we actually made people put their forks and knives down because they were louder than we were. So he was a pianist from South Africa. And so it was a wonderful experience because his originals were like anthems. They were all about South Africa. So when he taught the band the songs, we could play them. But our concept or understanding wasn't there. He would talk about the mountain in Cape Town. And he would say, "This song is called The Mountain. You have to feel it like this. It has to be free. It has to be comfortable. It has to be relaxing. It has to be meditative." And we would play it the best way that we can imagine. But we didn't really make the connection until he actually took us up to the mountain in South Africa. It was like a whole nother awakening. It was amazing. I can't even explain it. But when you went on the top of the mountain and just be able to view all of the countryside of South Africa and see all the little townships and everything, then we were on bandstand and we actually played it the way that he was interpreting the song to be. So that was such amazing learning experience, and to learn how to play the drums so soft that I wasn't even using sticks. I was using little brushes, little things, brush sticks, you know. So that was a wonderful experience. I played with Abdullah pretty much 17 years. So I was in and out of South Africa pretty much 17 years, and learning their concept of how they approach the music. It was a give and take. They really wanted to know how the U.S. drummers play, and I really wanted to know how they approach the rhythms, because they think completely different. Yeah.
So, what was that like in terms of communicating with people from different, really a different culture? And we're thinking that we have something to share because of the African heritage, but there's some obvious differences. So, how did you manage to navigate your way through that?
It was great. It was wonderful. I mean, South Africa is the first and only place that I actually, and I tell this all the time, talk about this all the time, that when I got off the airplane, someone came over to me and said, "Welcome home." And that was just so touching. And with all these things that they had gone through in the apartheid and everything, the people are very, very humble, very low key, very down to earth, very much willing to help you and show you this and show you that. They spoke English very, very, very well. And through Abdullah, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to meet Nelson Mandela. We played at the National African Convention. Oh Lord, I don't remember what year that was. It had to been around 2005 or 6. So Abdullah, we did the Abdullah Ibrahim trio, and all the entertainers walked up on stage and shake Nelson Mandela's hand. So Abdullah Ibrahim is also a political figure there as well. Like we have Harry Belafonte, who's also politically involved with what's going on here. So Abdullah was real close to Nelson Mandela. We actually went to Winnie Mandela's house for dinner. Abdullah knew the mayor, the governor of Cape Town and Johannesburg, and we was hanging out with royalty of South Africa. And it was a wonderful thing.
How does that shape your playing now? Because now you're back in the United States, and I know, thank goodness, you had a few moments to spare because you've been in New York playing again, and you're here in Baltimore now. But how did that impact your playing? Because you are now independent. You have your own trio, your own.
Right. But the South African playing, okay, I had to learn how to play real soft. Real soft. The United States hit hard. Hit hard. We want intensity. For all, they want that impact of power. So when I left his gig and came back here, on the bandstand, bass players were saying to me, "Come on, man, you gotta lay into it a little bit more. You've been playing with Abdullah too long. It's like you gotta lay into it, you gotta lay into it." So the growth part with Abdullah's music is that how I learned how to be colorful, how to use my cymbals differently, how to use my drums, not as drums, but as timpanis. Because there were times in his music, I had a big drum set. I must have had like maybe 7 to 8 drums. But I wasn't using them to just play roles all over the place. I was using them in the context of the song. There's certain songs that you need to hear a high-pitched drum. There's certain songs that you need to have the lower drums that sound like timpanis, like an orchestra. So I'm using all this differently than what I would normally think if I was here playing a jazz straight-ahead gig or an R&B gig. His music is more about colors and content and just being pretty. Swells, sort of symbols and things of that sort. So it really did teach me a whole nother approach when it comes time for that. But New York, the United States, is hard hit. They want you to lay into it. They want you to pretty much be solid.
Well, you have such a range of abilities and experiences. Um, I still think that you have a twin somewhere who's filling in for you and getting you to all the engagements that you've had because your lifetime of experiences is so wide and so deep. It's hard to believe just one person has lived all of that.
Mm.
So, what would you what's in your future? What are you planning next?
Well, right now, I'm going to be honest about it. I'm on the verge of moving back to New York because my work is just like calling me like crazy. I have three of my own bands, so I want to record at least two of them and just really get back into the mold of several things. I have a lot going on, like you said. I'm also a personal trainer. So I'm also doing workshops sometimes in clinics talking about the relationship, why musicians and the general public need to take care of their tempo and how they can go about taking care of their tempo and how musicians can take care of their tempo while being on the road, which is the most difficult thing ever because when you're on tour, you know, when you travel, all you're thinking about is eat, sleep, get up, play. Eat, sleep, get up, play. You're not even thinking about, sometimes you're so tired, you're not even thinking about exercise because now time changes. You leave the United States and then go to London, that's a 5-6 hour time change. Or fly from New York to Australia, that's a 15-hour time change. No, I'm sorry, 23-hour time change. So you're not thinking about exercise, but you have to try to do something in order to keep that body in tune and that immune system up while you're doing all this crazy commuting. Yeah.
So, what do you do to keep yourself in?
Well, I work out. So when I'm at the hotel, I'm turning chairs and the floor into the gym to do something for about at least 30-40 minutes. I'm very adamant about the eating. I just can't eat anything that anybody gives me. There's sometimes, like when I was working with Abdullah, the fortunate thing of working with Abdullah Ibrahim was that Abdullah was a vegetarian. And so we didn't have to worry about the whole band wants to go to Mickey D's and that I don't eat at Mickey D's because I've been in that kind of situation. Or, you know, everybody just do anything. And then you got promoters of people who just send you wherever. And so I can't find anything that I can eat. Fortunately with Abdullah, if the promoters want to take us to dinner, he would emphasize that it has to be a Japanese restaurant where food is safe, not no fast food, this and that and the other and stuff. So I try my best to stay away from fast food and drinking a lot of water and you know, every now and then maybe a white wine or red wine or something like that, but not crazy at all. Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to ask you to come back so you can talk about that piece of your expertise in some detail because I
Sure.
have been running some workshops. I really want to thank you for this amazing, fascinating conversation. There is so much more I could ask you and would. We've been going for a little while. So at this point, I just really want to thank you for your time. And I'm just so happy that you were able to squeeze us in. I know the viewers are just going to love this interview and they're going to probably watch it 2 or 3 times to get all those details that you shared, the little gems that you've been dropping along the way.
Mm-hmm.
This is a treat for me and an honor. And I really just want to thank you again.
Sure, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed myself.
Okay, so do I have a commitment from you to come back again?
Yes.
Wonderful, folks. You heard that, right? Okay. So thank you so much, George. It's been a pleasure.
Sure.
And I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon. Take care now. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.